invite you to get comfortable in your chair, let your feet find the floor, and turn inward with me now for a moment of meditation and prayer. Last week, I visited Mendon Ponds for the first time. I walked for a long time along the wooded path until I came to a log at the edge of the water. My thoughts were racing, full of things to do, places to go, stuff that needed to be remembered. And as I sat for a long time at the edge of the water, it slowly drifted away. I watched the geese float and dive on the water. My breathing slowed. My fingers and face tinged with cold. The words of this poem from Wendell Berry came to me. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. My prayer this morning is for those living with uncertainty of how ends will meet, of feeling how hard it is to ask for help. May those fears lie down and rest. May the needs all be met. For those whose lives are marked by illness and suffering, may they come into the peace of wild things. For those lonely, isolated, and tired souls, may they feel above them the day-blind stars waiting with their light. May we all rest in the grace of the world and be free. Amen. Blessed be.
I'm doing something a little different this week. In 2011, I got a call from Peter Morales, who's the president of the UUA, and he asked Scott and I to preach Sunday morning at General Assembly, which has 3,000 people at it, and it was very intimidating, and we kind of freaked out. Which, by the way, we had a due date of it a month and a half before I preached this sermon, and we were supposed to give it at, like, send it in at 7 o'clock in the morning. We got done at 4:30 in the morning. So, just saying, there was a lot of pressure on this thing. And the least of which was the day before, Kaaren Armstrong was the lecturer for the Where lecture. If you don't know Kaaren Armstrong, she's from the UK, and she is kind of the preeminent scholar about world religions together. And her main point the day before was, if you look at all world religions, they all are kind of talking about the same thing. She contends that it's all about compassion at the center of all of them. So we knew we had to engage with her on that. And also kind of like, what's the theology of Unitarian Universalism that is most important that we pay attention to? So this is the sermon that I did in 2011. And for a long time, it's been a very meaningful kind of experience of having that opportunity to be in close proximity to that many Unitarian Universalists. But this sermon in particular, the reason I'm doing it today, is because it will influence our conversations on Roots and Wings and give us some idea about what it is that we want to do and who we want to be as a congregation. Today I'd like us to continue the conversation that the wonderful author Kaaren Armstrong had us begin last night. I'd like to do that with two stories. The first is one of Kaaren Armstrong's favorite stories, and the second is one of mine. Here's the first one. It's an ancient story about Abraham, the kind of father of faith of Christians, Muslims, and Jews. It's difficult to discern what Abraham really believes. This is not a guy with a dogma or a 10-point confession of faith that he has memorized in his head. Instead, when it comes to belief, he's regularly kind of confused and asks more questions and doesn't really get satisfying answers. But what he does have is one profound religious experience. Abraham is sitting outside of his tent in the desert, and it is hot and uncomfortable, and he has sweat dripping from him. And as he sits there, you can just imagine he has this big feather fan going, maybe a cold glass of Chardonnay on the side. I would. And as he looks out on the horizon, he sees people, strangers. Now, in the ancient world, as is true with ours, strangers don't always offer an opportunity. Sometimes it's more of a threat, and that was true in Abraham's time. But what does he do? He stands up, he brushes the sand off of himself, and he greets them. Hola, ¿qué pasa? You are awake, aren't you? You wouldn't have said that. And he does greet them, though. And he invites these strangers to come and have a meal with him. And he lays out his best wares. And he feeds them the best of the food that he has to offer. He offers them comfort and solace. And it is in that moment that Abraham meets his God. And Abraham, without oracle or fanfare, has this deep experience with his God who is present with one of those strangers. The second story I want to tell you is a story of my friends Marcy and Brian. They live in New York City. And once they went to go get some food, and they went to a Chinese restaurant that, the kind of restaurant where you sit down at a table and there's a big window next to you that's right near the sidewalk. So they're sitting at this table, and they order some lo mein, and it comes, and they're eating it together. And then all of a sudden, this kind of wiry, agitated woman comes, takes the plate, and pulls it away. And she doesn't go to the kitchen. She walks outside of the restaurant, and she's standing right outside of the window. And she has the plate in the flat of her hand, and she is scooping up noodles, eating all of their food. The proprietor of the Chinese restaurant goes on out. He's pretty ticked off by this point. He stands in front of the woman. He yells at her in Chinese. She just keeps eating. He takes hold of the plate. She takes hold of the plate, and they go back and forth, and the noodles slide off, and the proprietor takes it and lifts it up like it's a treasure and a trophy. He walks back into the restaurant, and he brings Marcy and Brian some more noodles. But by this time, they had eaten much of it, and the woman had left. So they asked to have it boxed up. So they box it up, and they're walking about 3 blocks to go to the movie that they wanted to go to. And when they get around the corner, there is that agitated, kind of wiry woman, and she's yelling at somebody down the street. And Marcy says, "We should go talk to her." And Brian says, "Really? Can we just leave this woman alone, please?" And Marcy says, "No." She takes the food container, and she walks up to the woman, and she says, "We haven't been properly introduced, but I think you're hungry. Would you like my food?" The woman takes the food. She bows ever so slightly at Marcy, and she walks away. Now, my friend Marcy told me that story as an atheist, but as she said it, it was real and moving to her. She said something happened in that exchange, and she did not use traditional theological language. Yet, like Abraham, she was clear that her act of practical compassion and connection had led to a holy encounter. 2 stories, 2 very different theologies, one of Abraham, the theist, and the other of Marcy, the atheist. As belief systems, they're incompatible. As experiences, they're virtually the same thing. And here's where we, as Unitarian Universalists, are in very familiar territory. From where I stand, this sums up the dominant pattern of our theological debates in the last 20 to 30 years, especially as it's played out in our congregations. For years, we've begun discussions that start with 2 very different belief systems, usually very akin to what Abraham and Marcy had. And while these 2 opposing belief systems aren't always that of the atheist versus the theist, they have, for the most part of our history, been the 2 that get paired off against each other. And as belief systems, they've certainly sounded to us for a long time as an either-or option. But as we've pushed each other and fought with each other and belittled each other and hung in with each other and then listened harder and loved more lovingly to each other, we've eventually gotten around to talk about the common experience that is connecting those differing beliefs. We're, in a sense, come around to what my Midwest neighbors might describe as, you say potato, I say potato, but we're really talking and loving the same vegetable, right? Yes? Yes. Thank you. Now, I don't want to overstate this, and I do not want to pretend that the loose ends are neatly tied up. I know that in some pockets of our movement, the stale humanist-theist debate is still, unfortunately, alive and well. I know that some atheists are still trying to expose their theist friends' beliefs as illogical or as an inauthentic marketing ploy, so we're attracted to a Christian nation. I know that we still have some theists who privately and publicly pat their atheist friends on the head and condescendingly tell them they can't wait until the day they grow up and become more spiritual. But on the whole, the tide has completely changed. These are minor pockets and uncommon moments of slipping back into old habits, but it's not by any measure who we are anymore. And I think we've really grown up and are clear that the question of belief is not which belief is right or wrong, but does your belief lead you to the right experience, to the experience of practical compassion and connection? We at First Unitarian in Rochester like to provocatively say to our newcomers, Unitarian Universalism does not really care whether you're an atheist or a theist, a Christian or a Buddhist, or a Barnes and Nobleite. Our question for you is whether your atheism, theism, paganism, Buddhism, or Barnes and Nobleism leads you to connection, leads you to listen to your deepest voice, be open to life's gifts, and to serve needs greater than your own. In other words, do your beliefs help you connect to yourself and others and life? If your beliefs serve that higher purpose, they're in. If they don't, and we really mean this, they're out. Which, of course, is what Kaaren Armstrong was saying to us the other night. As she told us, and she's told the world now for a long time, all the major religious traditions in one way or another fundamentally talk about one thing: compassion and connection. Or as she puts it, we are most fully ourselves when we give ourselves away. The single test of every theology, of every spiritual practice she has studied, does it result in getting outside of your piggish self? Now, she doesn't say it that way, but that's kind of what she's saying. She loves to tell that story of Rabbi Hillel. She told it last night. Story goes that a pagan came up to Rabbi Hillel, and then he said he would convert to Judaism and the tradition if the rabbi could stand on one foot and tell the entire contents of the Jewish tradition of what was important. I'm standing on one foot. Can you see it? This is what he said. Do not do unto others as you would not have done unto yourself. That is the Torah, and the rest is commentary. Go do it. And I want you to notice something here. And this is where we get to the rub of the sermon today. Notice whenever Armstrong tells this story, she goes out of her way to stress that God wasn't mentioned. Nor was Mount Sinai, the law of the Holy Land, or other values inseparable from mainstream Judaism. She emphasizes that Hillel summed up the allegiance of Judaism as being devoted to that experience of compassion and connection. She often goes on and does that same analysis for other religious traditions. Now, when she does this, what I hear her doing is not just affirming the worth of many beliefs and many traditions, but boldly proclaiming that those diverse traditions and beliefs are accountable to a higher standard. She is declaring and calling every religious tradition to a higher authority, to the higher authority of the experience of compassion and connection. She is not talking, by the way, about the common good or celebrating diversity. She is kind of drawing a line, if you will, if you listen to her, to put it simply, between good religion and bad religion. Between religion that has the power to heal and hold the world and religion that has the power to really rip it apart. That's what I hear so clearly from her. But friends, and here's the thing, not so clearly from us. In other words, I see our journey of discovery over the last 20 years almost mirroring the journey of discovery that Kaaren Armstrong has been on. But she took that discovery and declared it to be the religion's core purpose and reason for being, while we still quite haven't gotten there yet. We took this experience of connection and used it to see how theists and atheists were on the same page, almost to heal our own internal divide in our congregations, if you will. But then we somehow never went on to claim it as our common and core purpose. And I know that's going to sound like I'm chewing us out, but I don't really mean it that way. All I mean to say is we found our center. We just haven't named it that yet. If this experience of spiritual connection and compassion is the best way to define the core purpose of our faith, if this is where we are at and captures what we are about, friends, I can guarantee you there is a huge hurting world out there that needs our help. And again, I want to say, I'm open to the possibility that the experience at First Unitarian in Rochester may not be representative. But from where I stand, the majority of people newly in our pews are no longer asking, do I need to leave my brain outside the door? They are asking, do I need to leave my pain outside the door? And I honestly don't hear them emphasizing their primary hunger as helping them explore spiritual depth or build their own theology. What I hear them saying is, you know what? There's a world out there that is ripping my life apart. And I am wondering if this place could help me or not. I can't deal with the materialistic, classist, consumerist, shallow, selfish, status-obsessed, indifferent, violent, economically unstable culture alone. A world that threatens to disconnect me from everything that I hold dear, everything that feeds me and gives me life. I can't do it on my own. And I want to know, is this place going to help me with this or not? See, more than anything this morning, I would like to be a mirror for us. I want to reflect back to you, my friends, and get us to notice this great insight that we actually have. We keep trying to figure out our saving message, but we've already got it. I want you to think about why you're here. Think about why you've given your heart and your hands and your wallets to the congregation that you come from. Is it simply because someone gave you the room and the space to decide whether you're an atheist or theist, pagan, Buddhist, or Christian? Or is it because your congregations, through sermons and in small groups and in justice work, help illuminate how your beliefs help connect you to yourself, to others, and to needs greater than your own? In this world of disconnection, isn't the value of your congregation found ultimately in being the force that dedicates itself solely to fighting disconnection? And also being clear to the world that that's what we are here to help with. Promoting the experience of compassion and connection, promoting that experience of connection, which is no small thing. I saw this in action in a very powerful way not that long ago in my own congregation. We had officially launched Connect and Breathe. Connect and Breathe is a nonprofit that we started at the church, an after-abortion, non-judgmental talk line that's available for the East Coast and the Midwest primarily. We had gathered all the volunteers in a circle to kick it off and share a meal, and then we joined with everybody in the sanctuary in that big circle. We wanted to do a ritual to start off intentionally about the work that we were doing. And everybody got a phone line, a piece of a phone line, as we are a phone talk line. And they were asked to do two things. To say, why are you doing this work, and what is your hope for Connect and Breathe in the future? And then, when you were done, you were to connect your telephone piece to the person next to you. And here we were, sharing stories with each other. Someone said, I want this talk line to stop the stigmatism of abortion and allow women and their families to have some peace with their decision. Someone else said, I just want to really listen, to deeply listen. Be present and offer hope. Someone else said, holding back tears, I'm here for a selfish reason. I want to make a difference in the world. So much hate and crap is thrown around at women on this topic, and I want to be a part of making it right. And I know doing this work, being on the phones, I will make a difference. As we went around the circle, more people said ditto, and as she said. And I closed it myself with this. I know why I'm here. When I had an abortion as a teenager, I was disconnected from my deepest self and from others. And as much as we can make that happen for other people, that's the work that we are here to do. And I am proud and honored to be in this circle with all of you as well. And then we held hands, and we said a blessing. And we went about doing the work that we were called to do together. Connection. That's so clearly our common thread and grounding. Whether called to that by a higher being or God, or by their own internal longing and broken heart in that moment, how we got there, it didn't matter. And I know it to be true. You can celebrate connection and compassion. Without arguing about how you got there. And maybe, just maybe, that is the most important belief of all. And one that needs to go front and center. May it be so. I love you, good people. Amen.
Please grab a hand of someone close to you as we extinguish our chalice together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.